Life is a journey that most people spend trying to fill with the voices and presence of others, always searching for someone to validate them, or to provide the happiness they feel is missing. Yet the truth is the deepest satisfaction and the truest. Joy comes from learning to be alone, learning to embrace your own company, and to find peace in the silence of your own thoughts. Too often, we think that being alone means being lonely, but in reality, being alone is an opportunity. It is a doorway to discovering who you really are, beyond the expectations, the pressures, and the noise of the world. When you are alone, you are free to think deeply, to reflect on your choices, and to understand the patterns in your life that have kept you from growing and evolving. It is in solitude that creativity flourishes, where clarity emerges, and where personal strength is forged. Learning to enjoy being alone teaches you to become self-sufficient and resilient. It allows you to build a life that is not dependent on the whims or validation of others. It opens the door to authenticity, because when no one is watching, you can finally show up as your truest self. This book is a guide to embracing that journey. It is a companion for those who feel uncomfortable with silence, and for those who are seeking a deeper understanding of themselves. Each chapter will explore the emotional, mental, and practical aspects of solitude, sharing real-life examples, stories of transformation, and exercises that will help you shift your perspective. You will meet people who have discovered their power in being alone. You will understand the common fears and myths about solitude, and you will learn step by step how to transform your relationship with yourself, so that being alone becomes not something to fear, but something to celebrate. This is not about isolating yourself from the world or avoiding connections. It is about enriching your inner world, so that every interaction you have with others comes from a place of fullness and not emptiness. By the end of this journey, you will begin to see that your best life does not start when someone else comes along to fill your gaps. It begins the moment you choose to stand fully in your own presence and to find joy, peace, and purpose in being with yourself. Chapter 1. The Power of Solitude. Solitude is often misunderstood by many people as loneliness or weakness, yet it is one of the most powerful tools for personal growth and transformation. When you spend time alone, you are forced to confront yourself, to see the patterns in your thoughts and behaviors that you usually avoid when surrounded by others. It is in these moments of quiet that you begin to discover your true desires, your values, and the dreams that have been hidden beneath the noise of life. Consider the story of Maya, who spent most of her 20s chasing friends, relationships, and approval from others. She believed that happiness existed only when she was surrounded by people. Yet after a sudden breakup and moving to a new city with no familiar faces, she was left alone with her thoughts. At first she felt terrified and restless, but gradually she began to explore her own interests, painting, writing, and jogging in the early mornings in solitude. She realized that she had passions and talents she had ignored in the rush to fit in and be liked. She found clarity in making decisions without external influence and discovered a strength within herself she never knew existed. This is the essence of learning to enjoy being alone. It is not about isolating yourself. It is about creating space to listen to your inner voice and to understand your own needs and emotions. When you are alone, you can reflect on past mistakes and victories without judgment. You can plan your future with intention, and you can create a sense of peace that is not dependent on anyone else. Another example is David, a man who spent years building but then he began spending mornings in meditation and evenings reading books he had always wanted to read. He reconnected with his childhood love of music and even started composing songs in his small apartment in the solitude. He regained confidence and discovered a version of himself that was more creative, more intentional, and more fulfilled than the person he had been before. The lesson from these stories is clear. Your value, your creativity, and your joy are not dependent on the presence of others. They are discovered when you are willing to face yourself, embrace silence, and explore your own mind and heart. The power of solitude is that it gives you freedom. Freedom from expectations, from comparison, and from the need to perform for others. It allows you to become self-sufficient, to cultivate resilience, and to develop a sense of inner peace that no circumstance or person can take away. As you continue through this chapter, reflect on the areas of your life where you have avoided being alone. Think about the ways you seek constant distraction or validation, and ask yourself, what might happen if you allowed yourself just 1 hour a day of uninterrupted solitude? Imagine the thoughts, insights, and inspirations that could emerge from that time. Imagine the confidence that would grow when you realize that your own presence is enough. This is the first step toward a life where being alone is not feared, but embraced, where you stop running from yourself and start celebrating the incredible person you are without needing anyone else to approve or accompany you. The journey of learning to enjoy being alone begins with awareness and acceptance. It begins with a decision to turn toward yourself with curiosity and courage. It begins with understanding that the richest relationship you will ever have is the one you cultivate with yourself. Chapter 2. Embracing your own company. Learning to enjoy being alone begins with the simple yet profound act of embracing your own company. Many people have grown up believing that happiness must come from other people, that parties, gatherings, and constant social interaction are the markers of a good life. Yet this belief often leaves us feeling incomplete because it overlooks the one relationship that matters the most, the one you have with yourself. When you start spending time alone, you may feel awkward, restless, or even bored. But this discomfort is the doorway to growth. It is your mind and heart adjusting to a new way of living, where you are not running from silence or seeking constant distraction. Think of Sarah, a young professional who spent her life on social media, constantly checking for messages, likes, and comments. She equated attention from others with self-worth when she decided to take a weekend retreat by herself in a small cabin surrounded by trees. She initially felt anxious and unsettled, yet as she spent hours hiking, journaling, and simply observing the world around her, she began to notice the richness of her own thoughts, the clarity of her emotions, and the joy of doing things for her own sake, not for approval or attention. She discovered that she could enjoy a meal alone, savoring the flavors without interruption. She could read an entire book without feeling guilty for not being with someone else. And she could lie under the night sky, feeling awe and gratitude without sharing it with anyone else. Another example is Raj, an entrepreneur who always sought validation from clients, friends, and family. He believed that his identity was tied to how others perceived him. When he started dedicating 2 hours every evening just to sit quietly at home, reflecting, he discovered a reservoir of creativity and insight that had been buried under constant busyness. He began sketching ideas, writing notes, and even planning projects that felt meaningful to him, rather than projects designed to impress others. And embracing his own company, he not only grew more confident, but also more authentic and resilient. The first step to enjoying your own company is to create intentional moments of solitude. Start small, perhaps with 10 minutes in the morning, sitting quietly without your phone or any distractions. Notice your thoughts, your feelings, and your breathing. Gradually extend this time. Allow yourself to cook a meal alone and truly taste it. Walk in your neighborhood observing details you usually miss, or listen to music. Without doing anything else during these moments, you begin to cultivate a sense of presence and self-awareness. The second step is to replace negative self-talk with curiosity rather than criticizing yourself for being alone. Ask yourself what you are feeling and why. Explore your desires, fears, and dreams as if you are a friend listening to another person. This practice turns solitude into a source of growth instead of discomfort. The third step is to pursue activities that nourish your soul. Reading, painting, exercising, or writing, even mundane chores, done mindfully, can become joyful when approached as acts of self-care. Rather than obligations. Over time, you will notice a shift. You will feel less dependent on others for happiness and more capable creating meaning and joy on your own. The people who embrace their own company are often those who show up most fully in relationships because they are whole rather than seeking wholeness from someone else. They are creative because they allow space for their imagination to flourish, and they are resilient because they know that whatever happens in life, they can always return to themselves. Chapter 3. Overcoming the fear of being alone. Many people are afraid of being alone, and this fear can shape the way they live, preventing them from embracing opportunities for growth and self-discovery. It often stems from a lifetime of associating solitude with loneliness, rejection, or inadequacy. Yet the truth is that fear is a signal, not a threat. It is your mind urging you to pay attention to parts of yourself that you have ignored. Confronting this fear is the first step toward freedom. Consider the story of Elena, who always avoided being alone. She filled her days with work. She felt the walls closing in, yet as the hours passed, she decided to simply sit on the balcony and watch the city lights. She focused on her breathing and allowed herself to notice the racing thoughts without judgment. Slowly she began to feel calm. She realized that the fear was largely imagined and that she could tolerate her own company. When she allowed herself to simply observe without rushing to fix or distract herself. Another example is Marcus, who grew up in a noisy household where silence was always filled with tension. He associated being alone with being unsafe and uneasy. When he moved into his own apartment, he avoided staying in his home for long periods, choosing instead to be with friends or in public places. Constantly one weekend, he forced himself to stay home alone with no distractions. He began cooking slowly, cleaning his space, and sitting quietly listening to music. He noticed a sense of peace that he had never experienced before. He realized that his fear of being alone was mostly a habit, and that solitude could be nurturing rather than threatening. Overcoming the fear of being alone requires practice and patience. The first step is to notice the fear and acknowledge it rather than fighting it or labeling yourself as weak. Sit with the discomfort and observe what thoughts and emotions arise. Notice the stories you tell yourself about being alone and question their truth. The second step is to create small, intentional periods of solitude. Start with 5 or 10 minutes and gradually increase this time. Engage in activities that you enjoy or that relax you. Reading, walking, cooking, or listening to music. Focus on being present in the moment rather than escaping from it. The third step is to reframe your perspective. Solitude is not emptiness. It is a chance to recharge, reflect, and reconnect with your deepest self. It is the space where creativity and clarity emerge, and where resilience is built over time. You will notice that fear diminishes as confidence grows. You will begin to feel empowered because you understand that you are whole with or without others. You will find that the insights Ideas and clarity that emerge in solitude give you strength and direction in all areas of life. The people who embrace their own company do not just survive alone, they thrive. They explore their passions, cultivate their creativity, and develop a sense of inner peace that becomes the foundation for every relationship they have, every decision they make, and every goal they pursue. Chapter 4. Building routines to enjoy being alone. Embracing solitude is easier when it becomes a part of your daily life through intentional routines and practices. Many people struggle with being alone because they lack structure or purpose. When you create rituals that honor your time with yourself, you begin to transform solitude from something uncomfortable into a source of joy, clarity, and growth. Consider the story of Nina, who always felt restless in the evenings. She would scroll through her phone endlessly or binge-watch shows. To avoid being alone one morning, she decided to try a simple routine. She set aside 30 minutes for journaling in the morning, 20 minutes for a walk in the park, and 10 minutes for deep breathing meditation at night. Over the weeks, she noticed a profound shift. She began to look forward to her time alone. She discovered that her thoughts became clearer and her emotions easier to understand. She even started experimenting with painting in the afternoons, something she had always wanted to try, but never made time for. Another example is Thomas, a freelance writer who often felt isolated when working from home. He decided to structure his day to include deliberate solo activities. He started his mornings with stretching and listening to instrumental music. He spent quiet hours writing without interruptions and set aside time in the evening to cook meals, mindfully noticing the flavors, textures, and aromas. He began to experience his own company as supportive and energizing, rather than lonely and heavy. Building routines to enjoy being alone begins with small intentional steps. Choose a time each day to engage in an activity that nourishes your mind, body, or spirit. It can be reading, walking, journaling, cooking, exercising, or practicing a hobby. Notice how your body and mind respond to this attention to yourself. Gradually expand the time and variety of activities in your routine. Incorporate reflection moments where you allow yourself to simply observe your thoughts and feelings without trying to change or judge them. Practice mindfulness and presence in each activity, noticing details you would otherwise overlook. Over time, these routines create a rhythm that allows solitude to feel natural, comfortable, and even enjoyable. Another key aspect is creating a dedicated space for being alone. It could be a corner of your room, a chair by the window, or a spot in the garden where you can retreat. Intentionally make this space inviting and peaceful. Personalize it with items that bring you joy, such as books, plants, candles, or music. When you enter this space, you signal to your mind and body that this is a time for reflection, rejuvenation, and connection with yourself. Remember that enjoying solitude does not mean eliminating connection with others. It means creating a foundation of self-sufficiency and inner peace from which every interaction becomes richer, more authentic, and more fulfilling. The people who master these routines find that their lives become calmer, more intentional, and more joyful. They learn to trust themselves, to enjoy their own company, and to create through solitude. When you spend time alone, you give yourself the rare gift of clarity. The world outside is filled with noise, distractions, and expectations that often pull you away from what truly matters to you. Solitude allows you to reconnect with your inner self, to explore your interests, your desires, and your unique talents. It is in the quiet moments, when no one else is watching, that you begin to uncover what makes your heart sing and your mind feel alive. Consider the story of Lila, who spent years working in a high-paying corporate job. She followed the path expected by her family and peers, believing that success equaled fulfillment. Yet she felt empty and restless. She decided to take a sabbatical and travel alone to a remote village. She spent her days walking through forests, journaling her observations and learning traditional crafts from local artisans. Over time, she discovered a love for teaching and creating art with children. When she returned home, she left her corporate job and started a small art education program that brought her immense joy and a sense of purpose. Another example is Samuel, a young man who always felt pressure to follow a conventional career path, yet he had a secret love for music and composing in his solitude. He started dedicating an hour each day to playing the piano and writing his own songs. He realized that his creativity was not a hobby, but a calling. He began performing at small venues and sharing his music online, finding fulfillment and confidence he never knew existed. The first step to discovering your passions through solitude is to listen deeply to yourself. Notice what activities make you lose track of time, what thoughts excite you, and what dreams you have been suppressing over the years. Allow yourself to explore these interests without judgment or the pressure. To perform the second step is to experiment, try new things, spend time on different hobbies or learning opportunities. Solitude gives you the freedom to explore without needing approval from others. You can make mistakes, learn, and grow in your own space and at your own pace. The third step is reflection. Set aside moments to journal, meditate, or simply sit and contemplate your experiences. Notice what brings you joy, fulfillment, and energy. These insights reveal clues about your purpose and direction over time. These small discoveries build into a clearer understanding of your passions and the life you want to create. Another important aspect is embracing patience. Discovering your purpose is rarely instantaneous. It requires consistent self-attention, reflection, and experimentation. Solitude provides the environment for this slow unfolding without distraction or comparison. The people who harness solitude in this way find that their lives take on a new depth and richness. They act from inspiration rather than obligation. They make choices aligned with their values, and they create a sense of fulfillment that is not dependent on external validation. Their confidence grows because they know themselves deeply, and their creativity flourishes because they honor their inner voice. The journey of discovering your passions and purpose through solitude is a process of turning inward. It is about listening to your heart and mind and giving yourself permission to explore and grow. It is about trusting that the more you know and embrace yourself, the more your life will align with what truly matters, and the more joy and meaning you will experience. Chapter 6. Building emotional resilience and self-confidence through solitude. Solitude is not only a space for reflection and discovery, it is also a training ground for emotional resilience and self-confidence. Many people rely on others to soothe their insecurities or validate their worth, yet the strongest people are those who can stand alone, face challenges with courage, and navigate life without constantly seeking approval. Being alone allows you to confront your fears, your doubts, and your limitations in a safe space. It teaches you that discomfort is temporary and that your inner strength is far greater than you imagine. Consider the story of Aisha, who grew up in a family that constantly criticized her. She learned to doubt herself and relied on praise from friends and colleagues to feel capable. When she started spending time alone, she faced the critical voice in her mind. For the first time, she began journaling her fears and affirming her strengths. She practiced meditation and mindfulness to observe her emotions without being overwhelmed. Over months, she noticed a transformation. She felt more confident, making decisions without asking others, and more resilient in facing setbacks, because she knew she could handle her own thoughts and emotions. Another example is Daniel, who had always been socially anxious. He avoided confrontation and doubted his ability to lead, yet when he started dedicating time alone to develop skills he wanted to improve, he read books on communication and leadership, practiced public speaking in front of a mirror, and reflected on past experiences. He learned to trust himself and his judgment. He realized that he could manage uncertainty and discomfort without panicking. He grew into a confident leader, respected by his peers, and capable of guiding others calmly and effectively. The first step to building emotional resilience through solitude is to notice and accept your emotions without judgment. When you are alone, you can observe feelings such as sadness, fear, anger, or anxiety without trying to suppress them or seek external reassurance. Acknowledge them and explore their roots. The second step is to challenge negative self-talk. Solitude gives you the space to question the stories you tell yourself about your limitations or inadequacies. Replace them with constructive and encouraging thoughts. Practice affirmations and remind yourself of past successes. The third step is to take small intentional risks in your alone time. Experiment with activities that stretch your abilities and push your comfort zone. It could be trying a new hobby, learning a new skill, or tackling a challenging task. In a reflective way, notice your progress and celebrate it. The fourth step is to cultivate self-care rituals that reinforce your confidence and emotional stability. Regular exercise, mindful eating, journaling, meditation, and hobbies create a foundation for resilience over time. People who embrace solitude in this way become emotionally independent. They learn that they can face disappointment, uncertainty, and change without feeling overwhelmed. They develop a strong sense of self-worth and confidence that comes from knowing themselves deeply rather than seeking approval externally. They can engage in relationships and challenges from a place of strength and balance rather than fear or dependency. Solitude becomes not a burden, but a source of empowerment, a safe space to recharge, reflect, and grow stronger. It is the quiet practice of standing with yourself fully that teaches you the most important lesson of all, that your presence, your strength, and your worth exist inherently within you. Chapter 7. Cultivating creativity and problem-solving through solitude. Solitude is not just a space for reflection and emotional growth. It is also the fertile ground where creativity and innovation thrive. When you are alone without distractions, you can think deeply, explore ideas freely, and make connections that are often hidden in the noise of social interaction. Many of the world's greatest thinkers, artists, and innovators credited moments of solitude for breakthroughs in their work. Consider the story of Clara, a graphic designer who always felt pressured by client expectations and deadlines. She rarely had time to explore her own artistic ideas. When she started dedicating an hour each day to creating art without rules, without judgment, and without concern for approval, she noticed a surge of inspiration. She experimented with styles, colors, and forms she had never tried before, and gradually developed a unique artistic voice that set her apart in her career. Another example is Michael, an engineer who struggled to solve a complex design problem. He realized that team meetings and constant collaboration were overwhelming his mind rather than helpful. He decided to spend a weekend alone, reflecting on the problem. He drew diagrams, sketched possible solutions, and allowed his mind to wander freely without interruption. By the end of the weekend, he had discovered an innovative approach that had eluded him in group discussions for weeks. The first step to cultivating creativity through solitude is to create dedicated time and space for uninterrupted thought. Remove distractions such as phones, emails, and notifications. Let your mind wander freely and explore ideas without pressure or judgment. The second step is to engage in exercises that stimulate creativity. Journaling, brainstorming, mind mapping, drawing, composing, or even walking in nature can unlock insights. The third step is reflection. Solitude allows you to revisit your thoughts and ideas. Multiple times you can notice patterns, connections, and possibilities that are not obvious in the chaos of social or work environments. The fourth step is experimentation. Try new approaches without fear of failure. Solitude provides a safe space to take risks, to explore unconventional methods, and to make mistakes that lead to learning and innovation. The people who embrace solitude for creativity find that their work becomes more original, more inspired, and more meaningful. They develop the ability to think independently and to approach problems with clarity and confidence. They learn that solutions often emerge when they give themselves the space to think deeply, rather than rushing or forcing ideas. The process of using solitude to cultivate creativity and problem solving is also empowering because it reinforces the belief that your mind is capable and resourceful. It teaches patience, persistence, and curiosity, and allows you to take ownership of your ideas and solutions over time. You notice that moments of being alone are no longer uncomfortable or lonely. They are treasured opportunities to connect with your inner genius, to explore possibilities, and to create work and experiences that reflect your authentic self. Solitude transforms from emptiness into a powerful tool for growth, inspiration, improving relationships by first being comfortable alone. Many people believe that strong relationships come from constant interaction and dependence on others, yet the truth is the most meaningful connections are built when you first cultivate comfort and confidence in your own company. When you are whole on your own, you engage with others from a place of fullness rather than neediness or insecurity. Consider the story of Rachel, who often felt anxious in friendships. She would agree to everything people wanted to do, fearing rejection or disapproval. She rarely expressed her true thoughts or desires. When she started spending time alone and exploring her own interests, she began to notice her patterns. She practiced saying no when necessary and pursuing activities that genuinely brought her joy over time. She discovered that friendships became richer because she was more authentic, more confident, and more present, rather than trying to fill gaps with constant attention. Another example is Omar, who struggled in romantic relationships. He depended heavily on his partner for validation and happiness. When he began embracing solitude, he explored his passions, reading, writing, and traveling alone. He developed self-confidence and a strong sense of identity. He found that he could enjoy time with his partner without fear or neediness, and that the relationship thrived because he approached it as a partner rather than a dependent companion. The first step to improving relationships through solitude is self-awareness. Solitude allows you to observe your thoughts, feelings, and patterns in interactions without distraction or external influence. Notice where you seek validation or approval and how it affects your connections. The second step is authenticity. Being alone helps you practice showing up as yourself without filters or masks. You learn to trust your own voice and express your true thoughts, desires, and boundaries. The third step is balance. When you are comfortable alone, you can decide when to spend time with others and when to retreat without guilt. You learn that your happiness does not depend on anyone else, and that you can engage in relationships freely rather than from fear or obligation. The fourth step is deeper connection. Solitude allows you to develop empathy and patience. You learn to listen deeply to yourself, which translates into listening deeply to others. You develop emotional maturity that strengthens every bond. The people who master solitude in this way find that friendships become more meaningful, romantic partnerships, more fulfilling, and professional relationships. More effective. They are not needy or dependent. They are grounded, confident, and capable of giving and receiving love, support, and collaboration in healthy ways. By first enjoying your own company, you transform the way you relate to the world. You stop chasing attention or validation and start building connections that are based on respect, authenticity, and shared growth. The journey of learning to enjoy. Being alone is not isolation. It is preparation. It is training for richer, fuller relationships. It is understanding that your presence is enough and that you bring value and depth to every interaction because you know yourself deeply and love. Mastering the art of joyful solitude in everyday life. Learning to enjoy being alone is not just about occasional retreats or weekends spent in reflection. It is about integrating solitude into your everyday life in a way that feels natural, empowering, and joyful. Many people think that alone time is a luxury or an escape, yet it can become a source of energy, clarity, and inspiration when approached intentionally. Consider the story of Hannah, who worked long hours in a busy city and often felt drained by social obligations. She began setting aside small pockets of time each day just for herself. 5 minutes of deep breathing in the morning, a short walk without her phone during lunch, a quiet cup of tea before bed. Over time, these moments became the highlights of her day. She noticed that she was calmer, more focused, and more creative. She also discovered that she could enjoy her own company, and that solitude no longer felt empty. Another example is Leo, who lived in a shared apartment and often felt overwhelmed by constant noise and presence of others. He started practicing micro-solitude moments. He would wake up 30 minutes earlier than his roommates to write or meditate. He would take solo walks in the evening and dedicate a corner of his room as a private space for reflection. These small but consistent practices transformed his emotional state. He felt more grounded, more energetic, and more connected to his passions. The first step in mastering joyful solitude is to recognize that it can exist in small increments, not just long retreats. Even a few minutes of intentional alone time daily can create significant change. The second step is to make solitude enjoyable. Engage in activities that you love or that nourish your soul. Reading, drawing, listening to music, cooking, or walking in nature. Approach these activities with full attention and curiosity. The third step is to practice gratitude for your own company. Notice the unique freedom that comes from making decisions for yourself, exploring your thoughts, and observing your feelings without external interference. The fourth step is to embrace quiet moments in everyday life. Waiting for an appointment, commuting, or sitting in a park can become opportunities for reflection, mindfulness, and connection with yourself. The fifth step is to combine solitude with creativity, reflection, and planning. Use alone time to brainstorm ideas, solve problems, or envision your goals. In these moments, your mind is free from distractions and external pressures. Over time, joyful solitude becomes a habit and a mindset. It becomes a way of living rather than something occasional. The people who master joyful solitude notice improvements in almost every area of their life. Their relationships are healthier because they are whole and grounded. They are more productive because they are focused and clear-minded. They are more creative because their minds have space to wander and innovate. And they are more resilient because they have practiced being comfortable with themselves in all circumstances. The journey to joyful solitude is ongoing. It is a practice yet it is one of the most rewarding practices anyone can cultivate, because it teaches you that your presence, your thoughts, and your dreams are enough. It transforms everyday life into a space for discovery, growth, and fulfillment. And it empowers you to create. Chapter 10. Living a fully empowered life after embracing solitude. When you have learned to enjoy being alone, life begins to take on a new depth and richness. The lessons from solitude shape the way you think, feel, and act. You develop clarity of purpose, emotional resilience, creativity, and confidence that allow you to live fully and authentically. Consider the story of Naomi, who spent years seeking approval in friendships and romantic relationships. She constantly worried about being liked or accepted, yet when she dedicated herself to exploring her own company, she discovered a strong sense of self. She pursued passions that excited her, built routines that nourished her mind and body, and began making decisions based on her values rather than the expectations of others. Over time, her relationships improved. She attracted people who respected her independence and authenticity, and she felt a freedom she had never experienced before. Another example is Victor, a corporate executive who felt trapped in his career by obligations and social pressures. He started practicing daily solitude through reflection, writing, and mindful exercise. He began noticing patterns in his life and making intentional changes. He pursued projects aligned with his vision and values. He became more creative and strategic in his work, and discovered a sense of satisfaction and meaning that was previously missing. The first step to living an empowered life after embracing solitude is to integrate self-reflection and intentionality into every decision. When you consult yourself first, you act from alignment rather than habit or pressure. The second step is to maintain routines that honor your need for alone time. Regular practices of journaling, meditation, reading, exercise, or creative work strengthen your connection with yourself and provide clarity and energy for other areas of life. The third step is to pursue your passions and purpose with courage. Solitude gives you the insight and confidence to take bold steps. You are not dependent on external approval or validation. Your choices come from your own clarity and desire. The fourth step is to approach relationships from a place of fullness rather than neediness. When you are comfortable alone, you give freely. You listen deeply, and you engage authentically rather than from fear or dependence. The fifth step is to embrace challenges and setbacks with resilience. Being alone teaches you to trust your abilities and face difficulties with confidence. You learn that discomfort is temporary and that your inner strength is always present. The people who live empowered lives after embracing solitude notice profound changes in every area of life. They feel less anxious and reactive, more confident and creative, more authentic and intentional. Their work relationships and personal growth all reflect the richness of their inner life. They are able to create a life that feels meaningful, joyful, and aligned with their deepest values. Living this way does not mean avoiding connection with others. It means that connection is now chosen consciously from a place of strength and self-awareness, rather than filling gaps or seeking validation. The journey of embracing solitude and living empowered is ongoing. It requires patience, attention, yet it is one of the most transformative journeys anyone can undertake. It teaches that the best life begins not when others validate us or accompany us, but when we stand fully in our own presence, when we find joy, purpose, and fulfillment in being with ourselves, and when we carry that strength into every interaction, choice, and experience. We create a life that is whole, authentic, and profoundly rewarding. Chapter 11. Sustaining your growth and enjoying a lifetime of solitude. Embracing solitude is not a one-time achievement. It is an ongoing practice, a way of life that requires attention, consistency, and care. The lessons you have learned from previous chapters are the foundation, but sustaining. Growth means integrating them into every aspect of your daily life and approaching solitude with curiosity, joy, and intentionality. Consider the story of Felicia, who had discovered the power of being alone through weekend retreats and daily journaling. She noticed the benefits immediately, but when work pressures, social obligations, and family responsibilities increased, she began to slip back into old habits of distraction and avoidance. She realized that growth requires maintenance. She created a flexible routine that included short moments of solitude during her commute, her lunch break, and before bed. She revisited her journaling exercises, reflection practices, and creative exploration. Regularly, she learned to protect her alone time without feeling guilty, and found that this consistency allowed her to remain centered, confident, and energized throughout her life. Another example is Marcus, who had embraced micro-solitude through walks, music, and personal projects. Yet when he faced challenges in his career, he noticed anxiety creeping back. He committed to revisiting his meditation practices and dedicating weekly longer periods of intentional solitude to reflect, plan, and recharge. He discovered that by sustaining these practices, he could navigate stress with resilience, clarity, and creativity. The first step to sustaining growth is to recognize that solitude is a lifelong practice. It is not something to perfect, but something to nurture and return to intentionally. The second step is to remain flexible. Allow your solitude practices to evolve with your life circumstances. Some days it may be a long walk, other days a few quiet minutes. The key is consistency and presence. The third step is to integrate reflection and gratitude. Regularly notice the ways solitude has shaped your thinking, emotions, creativity, and relationships. Acknowledge your progress and celebrate small victories. The fourth step is to continue exploring new interests, hobbies, and practices. Being alone provides the perfect environment for growth, experimentation, and learning. Allow yourself to try new things and expand your horizons without fear or judgment. The fifth step is to use solitude as a tool to navigate challenges, fear, and uncertainty. When life becomes stressful or overwhelming, your alone time becomes a source of clarity, energy, and insight. You learn to respond rather than react, and to act from alignment with your values, rather than impulse over time. The people who sustain solitude in their lives notice that their growth is compounding, their resilience deepens, their creativity blossoms, their confidence strengthens, and their relationships become richer and more authentic. They live intentionally rather than reactively, and they find joy and meaning in everyday moments. The journey of solitude is never finished. It is a dynamic, evolving practice that reflects your growth and life experiences. It is a source of empowerment, inspiration, and renewal that can be relied upon throughout every stage of life. By embracing and sustaining your alone time, you create a life where you are consistently aligned with yourself, your values, and your passions. You discover that being alone is not a temporary escape, but a lifelong source of energy, insight, and joy, and that the best life is the one you cultivate within yourself before it radiates outward, deepening solitude for mindfulness and creative mastery. Once you have embraced solitude and integrated it into your life, the next step is to deepen your practice to unlock even greater clarity, mindfulness, and creative potential. Many people spend alone time passively scrolling or filling it with low-energy distractions. Yet true solitude becomes transformative when it is intentional, immersive, and reflective. Consider the story of Isabel, a writer who had developed a daily journaling and reflection habit. She realized that her creative ideas were still fleeting and fragmented when she decided to extend her solitude periods. She created a small dedicated space in her home, with natural light, a comfortable chair, and minimal distractions. She practiced mindful breathing meditation before writing and allowed her thoughts to flow freely. She noticed that her ideas became richer, her writing more authentic, and her creativity more consistent over time. She produced work that she felt deeply proud of. Another example is Julian, a musician who had been using solo practice sessions for skill development. Yet he found his compositions lacked depth. He began to combine solitude with active mindfulness, focusing on sound textures, rhythms, and patterns. He experimented with improvisation. Without judgment, he recorded and reflected on each session. He noticed insights emerging that he had never observed before, and his music developed complexity and soul. The first step to deepening solitude is to create dedicated and intentional environments, remove distractions, and cultivate spaces that support focus, reflection, and creativity. Allow yourself to feel comfortable in silence and let your mind wander purposefully. The second step is to practice mindfulness during solitude. Notice your thoughts and feelings without judgment. Observe the flow of ideas, emotions, and sensations, and allow them to inform your creative or reflective practice. The third step is to engage in active creation or exploration. During solitude, write, draw, compose, plan, invent, experiment, and allow failure to be part of the process. The fourth step is reflection. Record insights, observations, and inspirations from your solitude time. Journaling or recording allows patterns and deeper understanding to emerge. The fifth step is integration. Bring the lessons, insights, and creativity from your solitude into your everyday life. Use them to make intentional decisions, to solve problems, to innovate, or to enrich relationships over time. People who deepen their solitude in this way develop mastery over their creativity and thought processes. They cultivate calm, focus, and clarity that allows them to navigate life with confidence and purpose. They become attuned to their inner voice, capable of generating ideas and solutions that are original, meaningful, and aligned with their values. The practice of deepening solitude is not a one-time achievement. It is a lifelong approach to living intentionally, creatively, and mindfully. It allows you to experience the full richness of your inner life and to translate that richness into action, impact, and fulfillment. When you master deep solitude, you discover that your mind is expansive, your creativity limitless, your awareness profound, and your life deeply aligned with the person you are at your core. Conclusion. The journey to your best life begins within. The journey of learning to enjoy being alone is not a destination, but a continuous practice. It is a commitment to knowing yourself deeply, trusting your own presence, and cultivating a life that is rich, meaningful, and aligned with your values. Throughout this book, we have explored the power of solitude, the ways to embrace your own company, how to overcome fear, the importance of routines, the discovery of passions and purpose, the building of emotional resilience and self-confidence, the cultivation of creativity and problem-solving, and the transformation of relationships and everyday life through intentional solitude. Each chapter has shown that being alone is not a void to be feared or avoided. It is a fertile ground where clarity, creativity, strength, and joy emerge. When you allow yourself to face your thoughts, feelings, and dreams without distraction, you develop insight and courage that no external influence can give you. The stories of people like Maya, David, Elena, Raj, Lila, Samuel, Aisha, Daniel, Clara, Michael, Rachel, Omer, Hannah, Leo, Naomi, and Victor illustrate that solitude is not loneliness, but empowerment. It is not emptiness, but fullness. It is not isolation, but preparation for living a life that is authentic, intentional, and deeply satisfying. The practice of solitude teaches patience, presence, and self-reliance. It allows you to confront fear, discomfort, and doubt with courage and curiosity. It nurtures creativity and problem-solving because your mind has space to wander and make connections that are hidden in noise and distraction. It improves relationships because you bring your full, authentic self into every interaction. It strengthens emotional resilience and self-confidence because you know that whatever challenges arise, you can face them and recover. It reveals your passion's purpose and deepest desires because you finally listen to the voice within the noise of life. The ultimate lesson of embracing solitude is that your best life begins not when someone else fills your gaps or validates your worth, but when you stand fully in your own presence, when you choose to enjoy your own company, and when you cultivate joy, peace, and purpose from within. This is the foundation for every decision, goal, relationship, and creative endeavor. The world will always offer distractions, demands, and expectations, yet the inner life you build through solitude remains untouched, steady, and empowering when you return to your daily life after practicing solitude. You carry with you clarity, confidence, creativity, and a deep sense of fulfillment. The path to your best life is paved with moments of being alone, moments where you reflect, explore, create, recharge, and grow your presence. Your thoughts and your dreams are enough. And when you embrace this truth, you discover that being alone is not a void to fear, but a life to celebrate, a life where your power, joy, and purpose come from within and radiate outward, transforming everything around you. The end.